My mission in life is not merely to survive, but to thrive, and to do so with some passion, some compassion, some humor, and some style.
We are here today with my very good friend, Melissa Campesi. How are you, Melissa?
Hi, George. How are you? I'm so glad to be
good.
here.
So I want to introduce you really quick, and then you'll have an opportunity to introduce yourself. So for the folks out there that don't know Melissa, which I know a lot of you in education already do, but for the folks who don't, she's an entrepreneur, a teacher, an advocate, and a writer. I love that you excel in three major areas of your life. Number one, you're an awesome wife and mom. Number two, you're passionate about music, like many other people, but you sing and play the piano, which is a little different. And number three, you're passionate about writing. Now, before we get into how you do each of these three things at such a high level, can you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure, I'd love to. Hello, everyone. My name is Melissa Campesi. I'm a children's author, but formerly an ESL educator in New Jersey. And now I am going around visiting different schools and bookstores and promoting and sharing my two books. I am an English language learner, which is about cultural stories. And also my other book is Imagine Song, which is about the power of your inner creativity and how you should share it with the world.
She's doing big things, y'all. She's doing amazing things. So for the audience, they may not know, but Melissa and I met on social media, I want to say in 2020.
Yes, and it was definitely during the pandemic.
Right. It was in the pandemic, and she's all over Twitter, all over Instagram. But Melissa, tell the people, what is the status of our relationship today? How has it evolved?
I look up to George. I definitely instantly connected with you because you turned your passion into purpose. And that's what I try to strive to do every day. And you have also become a mentor to me over the years. I've reached out to you a lot, asking you suggestions about certain things, and you've always helped me and guided my way through some of the times I was stuck on my path. So that's how we met and connected. And also, I think one time you shared pictures of your childhood from Queens, and I go, "Is another Queens boy." I grew up in Queens as well till I was 12, and we have that connection as well. But I have to find out: are you a Mets fan or a Yankees fan?
I'm a Mets fan.
Okay, so you're really Queens.
Let's give a shout out to Queens for everyone listening. Now, I know that you're in New Jersey now, right?
Yes.
Okay, so when I grew up, early on, the Mets were the team. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if there's any New Yorkers out there, but remember the 86 Mets, the 88 Mets. And so I will always be a fan of them. Of course, I love the Bronx. I was born in the Bronx, and I love the Yankees, but I love the Mets more. So,
Okay.
So for folks listening out there and watching, if you're new to our show, it's called the Lifelong Learn and Define Podcast, where I interview sometimes educators, sometimes my friends, and I ask them about three things that they excel at. And we make sure that these are things that the audience really, really cares about. And so if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel by just hitting subscribe. All right. So let's start with your family. Okay. What does being part of a family mean to you?
Of being part of a family means unconditional love and compassion. We're always there to support each other and hold each other up and help guide each other through life's ups and downs. Also, what family means to me is continuation. So what I think of is whatever I'm doing now with my children, I'm hoping to instill and model for them of how they can be with their families and so forth down the line. So, for example, yesterday I made some tomato sauce And I do that sometimes on Sundays because my father used to do that on Sundays. And when me growing up, we had always had my friends over and we had family over, and my dad would cook for everybody. And yesterday we had my boys over with their neighbors, and we were having pasta together and talking and chatting. And I was just thinking, I go, this is wonderful, something that my father has taught me to do as a parent. I'm trying to instill this now with my kids to keep those traditions alive.
Yeah, it's all about traditions. And that is something that as I'm getting older, I turned 48 a couple of weeks ago, and you start to think about when you're not going to be here, right?
Yeah.
And I keep on telling myself, and I keep on telling my own children, like I'm very intentional, like how you are, and letting them know what we're doing now is a tradition. And I want you to do these things when I'm no longer here so that you know what to do. But also, I want you to remix it and do it in your own way. And so I think that's
Right.
fabulous. So
Yeah.
I want to ask you though. So I know that you're Latina, but you talked about, tomato sauce, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So
My mother was born in Cuba. She's a Cuban immigrant.
mhm,
My grandfather as well is Cuban. They left Cuba in the 60s because of the communism. They went to live in Spain because my maternal grandmother was born there. So they were able to live in Spain for a couple of years. And then my grandfather, who thought Spain was a little bit too slow paced for him, came to the United States and settled in Astoria, Queens.
Astoria, Queens. Wow.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yes. And my
Wow.
dad's family is of Irish and Italian descent. So my dad was born and raised in Queens as well, from Jackson Heights.
So I have definitely been there. I've definitely been
Mm.
there. I grew up in Queens, so I know
Yeah.
exactly what you're saying. So,
Yeah.
all right. So you got your, traditions down.
Hmm.
And as we know, family, it's about relationships, right?
Yeah.
And it sounds like you have a big family, right? Not everyone has a big family, but you definitely do. How
Hmm.
do you maintain really close relationships, beginning with your husband and your children?
I may maintain relationships with them. I think just always keeping the conversation doors open, not being judgmental, not being quick to punish. So I'm always there to kind of understand where my children are at or where my husband is at the moment. And it's just, before I spoke about love and compassion, it's that compassion piece. Before jumping into, don't do that. Oh, I feel like we're all so quick to do that, but it's really trying to understand where our kids are coming from. And you have two kids like I do, and they're both totally different personalities. So how I handle certain situations with my oldest son is completely different to how I handle situations for my younger son. So it's also knowing the personalities and the dynamic of the relationships.
Mm. And it's so interesting. The thing that you said is that you don't judge.
Mm-mm.
My children, and I'm sure most children, most people hate being judged, right? How did you learn that? Because I had to unlearn how to give feedback. So,
Mm-hmm.
how did you learn that?
Well, I think it's firsthand basis. I think it's because I was judged a lot
Mm,
growing up, and people look at you and think that you're a certain way when they don't really know you. And so I feel like I've always been trying to, I don't want to say prove people wrong, but show them more of who I am as a person. And I want the same thing for my children. I don't want someone to look at them and be like, oh, they look this way, they're a certain way. And that goes for anybody. So, and I hope to teach them that as well when they encounter different relationships throughout their life, that, be open to everybody and feel people out first before thinking, oh, they look this way and they're going to be this certain way.
that's a really good point. That's a really good
Hmm.
point. So, I do want to ask you about relationships in a big family.
Hmm.
Um, a lot of people. So, I'm a big fan of 50 Cent, and 50 Cent said, I don't go to Christmas. I don't go to Thanksgiving because I just don't get along with my family. There's always someone that's
Oh,
going to say something. in a jealous way, and I'm going to get mad. And I really don't want to do that. And so I know a lot of people that struggle with their family members. How do you maintain close ties with all these folks?
I say, well, I love hosting, and when I have people over for family events, like for Christmas or birthday parties or whatever, I try to get everybody involved. So whether that's if they want to cook with me, if they want to help me set the table, if they want to bring their own, special dish, whatever it is, I just, when people come to my home, just like how it was in my classroom as a teacher, I want people to feel like they belong there, that they are valued. And I also like to play games. So a lot of times, like for Christmas or for New Year's, we do a lot of fun board games with each other, even with the kids, just for some memories and for laughs.
So to a listener that's out there and they're struggling, right? Not everyone's an extrovert. Not everyone is as intentional as you are or as other people, and they're not as lively. What are 3 pieces of advice that you would give them if they're struggling to really connect with their spouse, with their children, or other family?
Well, I think number one is to put the judgment away. Even though we might not feel like we are, always double check how you're feeling, and make sure that whoever comes to your house, you open them with, with the embrace and love. And like I said earlier, have them be involved, have them bring something that's special to them. I also try to set the tone. I always have music on. And I try to make life fun because, like you said earlier, life is short. And, we've all been through struggles and, illnesses and all that stuff. And I've seen that. And that's a part of life that we have to accept. But we also have the power to create these beautiful moments with our family. And when it comes to family, I try to, make them memorable, make them happy, and make everyone feel like they belong. So that would be the third thing, to just always make them feel like they belong, whether it's, being part of the game and having some laughs, or, why don't you make that cocktail drink and we'll name it, the George, or, whatever it is, those little things to make them feel like they want to come back.
Make people feel like they belong. That is one of the best pieces of advice that I've heard on the show in dealing with family. So for folks out there, if you like to host, if you have folks over, make sure you make them feel like they belong. Now, sometimes we have those friends and family, though, that no matter what we do, no matter what we serve, how we treat them, whatever, they will always find a way to make it bad. And so I have been learning to exclude those people, just exclude them until they're ready to be part of the group again. I was watching Jersey Shore back in the day. I'm not sure if you ever saw it. And Mike the Situation used to say, "You are officially excluded from ravioli night, pizza night, or whatever type of night. You're excluded until you can act better." So that's like the new motto. So
that's so funny. Got to learn how to behave. You got to learn how to be part of the pack, right?
You need decorum in life. That's what my daughter says. You need decorum. So yeah, that's excellent. All right. So this show is called the Lifelong Learn and Define Show for folks that are just tuning in. And so we don't focus on one topic, and it doesn't have to necessarily be something in education, but it's got to be something that my guest is very passionate about. And so now I'm transitioning from family, from relationships into music. And the reason why I'm doing that is because when I became friends with Ms. Campesi, I thought she was just education. She's a creative writer. She's a children's advocate. And I'm seeing a lot of this on her social media feed. But one day I saw a reel, and my good friend Melissa is playing the piano and singing her heart out. And so I had to watch, and I have to say, she's very talented. And so, Melissa, how did you get into performing music?
So I would have to go all the way back to maybe I was five-ish or 5 or 6. And we have this piano in my house that my grandfather purchased when he first came to the United States. And he used to work 3 jobs. So when he used to come home tired from working the 3 jobs, he made sure his daughters had piano lessons and play the piano. So when he got home, all he wanted to do after he ate dinner was sit in his chair and listen to his daughters play the piano, especially for Elise. For Elise was his favorite song. And that's kind of how he, kind of relaxed and kind of focused on his family and spend time with his daughters. So I always had that story instilled in me as a child. And that piano was always hanging around my grandmother's apartment. I used to live upstairs and my grandmother lived downstairs. So she pretty much raised me as well. And I just always wanted to explore the sounds of the piano. So I would always go to it. I remember watching Alice in Wonderland, like the cartoon, and pretending some scenes in my head of Alice in Wonderland and kind of like play like the background music of to the movie. So that's how I started. And then my parents put me in piano lessons. He was a great pianist from Spain. I used to do piano lessons like once or twice a week. And then from there, it just started to grow. And about like high school age, I felt that I wanted to write my own music, and I explored the piano that way. And that's how it kind of grew into becoming like a songwriter.
So have you done anything with that? Like, have you put your music out on iTunes or on Spotify?
No, and I'm open to it, but right now I'm still taking those like little like steps of courage. And I love putting it on Instagram. Right now I'm just doing it on Instagram because I feel like Instagram's like almost like a artistic portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
So like if someone goes to your page, they look at all the pictures and they could see like, okay, this is what Melissa's about, or this is what George is about. So that's one way I like to share and connect the music in that way.
Gotcha. So like you, I'm a creative, not a creative in music, but I remember when I would create videos back in the day, and I would sit on my videos and not post them because I wasn't confident and I wasn't sure how it would be received. But you put your music out there. When did you realize, or what was like your epiphany? I really have talent. Like I can really do this, and I'm going to put it out there.
I just felt like it was time for it to be shared. So I had so many years in my teens and in my 20s and the beginning of my 30s where it's like you kept this like to yourself. And I feel like there just comes to a point where it's like expose it. And as far as like caring what people think, of course we all have a level of like what people think and what we post and stuff, but I think if it comes from your authentic self, I say go for it. If it's part of who you are and it's like burning in your heart, I say share it. And it's going to touch the ones it's supposed to touch. And even if it's like 5 people, I'm happy with that.
So for folks out there listening, she's giving some really, really good advice on putting yourself out there. And one of the things that I've learned is that a person that isn't doing the things that they want to do with their life, those are the people that typically have negative things to say about other people. Unfortunately, when someone isn't evolved or isn't confident, unfortunately, that is a form of trauma that many people experience, me, myself included. And so it really is about developing ourselves and being happy with ourselves because, like Melissa said, you never know who you're going to impact. And so I have a confession. So when I was a kid, I wanted to be a rapper. I know. but I didn't have the talent for it.
I love
And
it.
I remember that I would write raps and write rhymes. And my good friend, Phil, who will be on the show on Wednesday, he was my best friend in college. And in my early 20s, he said to me, you know, maybe you're too old to be doing that. Put your effort into something else. And that was the first time that someone said, put your effort into something else. And what I realized was that instead of writing poetry, creative
Mm-hmm.
writing, right, like how you do,
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
can be a writer and write articles and write books. And
Yeah.
I can be a presenter. I don't necessarily have to be a rapper. And so I've
Mm-hmm.
improvised the talents and the passion that I have in a way that I can do it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's the thing though. If you look at my Instagram reels, you will always find old school hip hop music.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my way of respecting that part of me, that it didn't die. It just got changed around a little bit.
Yeah.
So for folks out there listening that love music, that may not have the talent, or they want to incorporate music into their work, Melissa, what are 3 pieces of advice that you would give them?
Well, I think that incorporating music into your work enhances your work. And I always think of it almost like being like a movie. And I think I mentioned that to you one day. It's like, the coming attractions, like imagine the coming attractions without sound. Like it doesn't have the impact that it does when it has the sound. So I kind of see the same thing like you do with the reels, or like if I do with quotes or something. And I think any other creative outlet like music enhances that.
Yeah, I definitely see that. And I've also heard that if you put a trending song, and so
Mhm.
I tend to put the older songs, stuff that has influenced me. And so I'm learning how to figure out like how to do that. So
That's right.
thank
And that's
you.
another piece of advice, like picking music that represents you. And I
Right.
think also picking part of the music that the words kind of go with the lyrics go with what you want to show, or what the message that you want to send out. The
Mm.
lyrics too are really important.
Yeah, yeah. So I appreciate that. Folks out there, don't be afraid to incorporate music,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's just instrumentals, into your work. And if you have a talent, put it out there, put it out there. That's what we're learning
Mm-hmm.
from Melissa. All right. So now we're going to transition into creative writing. And so I had to do my research. I had to go on Chat GPT and I had to look up, well, what's the difference between a creative writer and someone who writes articles? And so we'll get there in a moment, but can you
Mm-hmm.
define creative writing for the audience?
Well, for me, creative writing is writing that doesn't have boundaries, that doesn't have structure, and it is driven by whatever is in you. I love writing, but even in school, I did not do really well in structured writing, like the topic sentence and this and this. That used to drive me crazy because I'm designed differently. So, like what you do with your articles, how you take your rap influence, which rap is to me is poetry with rhythm and beats. I try to take when I write my articles, I try to take those creative writing ideas and incorporate them into my articles as well. Especially what I like to use is like imagery, a lot of words that kind of like paint the picture for you.
Mm, mm. So for our scholars out there, would you mind if I read the difference?
Of course,
Real
yeah,
quick? Yeah, so I went
yeah.
on ChatGPT. For folks that don't know, ChatGPT is one of several AI models, artificial intelligence, and I asked for a comparison. And so it says that creative writing is a form of writing that is focused on self-expression and imagination, just like Melissa said. It often includes fictional or poetic elements, and it is intended to entertain, inspire, or provoke an emotional response from the reader. Examples include short stories, novels, poetry, and scripts for films or plays. Now, on the other hand, writing articles on education topics is more focused on providing information, analysis, and commentary about specific topics related to education.
Mhm.
This type of writing is typically non-fictional and aims to educate and inform readers about a particular topic. Examples include articles that lift up teaching strategies, educational policies, or research findings. And so I think it's important that folks understand what the difference is, but there's still a process
Mhm.
that someone has to undergo in order to be really, really good at it. So,
Mhm.
what are your go to practices for honing your skill as a creative writer?
So for writing, I just recently wrote a blog about it. I like to set the stage. I like to set the environment, and I do that in igniting my five senses. So when it's planned writing, sometimes it's spontaneous writing, but when it's planned writing, I like that. I like it quiet. I don't really like movement in the house, like when my boys are playing or tackling each other. I usually like, having a candle on, putting a music that kind of matches my mood. I usually like listening to Radiohead because I find their music very eclectic. So it's like a little bit of blues, it's a little bit of rock, it's a little bit of, instrumental. So, those kind of elements, I kind of like set the stage of the environment to write. And then I, sit down, and usually the first time I write something, I'll have an idea in my head and I just pour everything out on the paper. And what's beautiful about writing is that, when you have a journal like I do here, I always look at it as an open, like a house, and the door is always open, right? So, I could sit down for 10, 15 minutes, write, and if there's nothing else, I'll go back to it. And that's just the creative process. The creative process is usually like gathering your thoughts and ideas, putting them down, and then there's an incubation time where it's like you kind of have to let it sit and revisit and go back. So it's like you're
Mhm.
revisiting this house. It's like an open door. Another thing that I like to do, especially when I don't feel so inspired, is to search for prompts. So it could be visual prompts. It could be, things that you see online. It could be going out in nature and getting your phone out and taking pictures of things that might inspire you, a street light or the road or a tree. And you start little, like you start, whether it's a flower or something, and you just use that as a prompt to write whatever reflections that you have.
Mm.
Yeah. And I just think that the other thing is, don't put so much pressure on yourself. Don't judge yourself. When you first write, just you put whatever is first on in your thoughts down. And then, like you said, you just grow it little by little. And then when it's ready, it's ready because it's just going to feel and sound good. And, a lot of times, like I know people use social media for, sometimes, negative things, but I use social media for positive things. I like to follow other writers. I like to follow other musicians. And I kind of use it to my benefit because it helps me grow and see things, from a different perspective. And it's like, it influences me to make my craft a little bit better.
That is so good. That is so good. That is perfect advice. So, for folks out there listening, if you want to be a writer, really, if you want to be anything that involves your creativity, set the stage for it, right? Dim the lights, right? Put the
Mhm.
music on, do the things
Mhm.
that Melissa said. Can I give a little bit of my writing journey? Is that okay? Like I know
Yes,
we're
of
interviewing you.
course.
So
Yes.
I write articles and I'm now on my fourth book. And one of the things that very early on, I wanted to be a writer. So for folks that don't know, my very first article that was published was in high school. I
Wow.
wrote an article about my experience in going to family court. and being in foster care. And my teacher thought it was great, and she had it published in some high school magazine. I'm not sure exactly which one. I wish I could find it. I'm not sure if I'll ever find it again, but that was a long time ago. It was in 1994. So there was no internet back then. But when I wanted to become an author and become a writer, I feel like I manifested it. I wrote down like what my goal was about 6-7 years ago. And I'll be very honest, I was intimidated by my own goal, but I wanted to publish, especially on Edutopia. And it took me 5 years before I developed the ability to explain what I'm doing in my classroom or my advice for other educators in a logical, in a coherent, straightforward way that's really built on a framework of a little bit of research, my personal insight, how I'm doing it, but then actionable steps and strategies. And so the way that I honed my craft initially was writing 90 minutes a day. And I would wake up every day, 4 or 5 in the morning, and I would dedicate 90 minutes. That's why I have such a big body of work. And I was paired with, now she's a friend, Marva Hinton over at Edutopia. And Marva really helped me in finding my voice and finding my way. And if you read my articles now, like you can see that it's always in my voice and it's very conversational. But for folks out there listening, my process has changed. I no longer have 90 minutes a day to write. So another friend named Crystal told me, well, I write 250 words a day. That's all I got time for. And so that's all I do now. But if you think about it, that's in 3 months, that's like a book.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And if you write your articles every week, every month, like how you do, and I do, you have parts of your chapters already laid out. So for folks out there listening who want to be a writer, right? These are the type of things that you can do. And that's why we had Melissa on the show explaining this, because she has tapped into her creativity. And so for someone, right? So we give them a lot of tips, right? And that could be overwhelming. But for someone that is looking to get into writing, hone their skills, what piece of advice, 1 or 3 things that you would tell them?
I think again, don't be hard on yourself. When you start, a lot of people start and they compare themselves to other people, and then they're like, oh, all right, I'm going to give up. This doesn't sound good. And like I said, you have to build your endurance. You have to keep with it. I have so many journals. I have journals that are for creative writing, for songwriting, for educational themes. And little by little, I go back to each one. When ideas pop up, I go back to each one and I build on it. And yeah, some of them are not going to be masterpieces, which is fine. But eventually, like you say, you work on it little by little, you will build up a masterpiece. You will build up your book. You're putting in the time for the chapters. And also there's editors. I'm not so great at the mechanics of writing. So I after I'm done with my work, just like I did with my books, I sent them to like 10 people to edit and give me their feedback as well. So, the collaboration, I think, is important as well with the writing journey. Don't put so much pressure on yourself, I think, is a big takeaway for me.
Yeah. And that's how music gets made too. And really, that's where anything that involves a creative process is created. Like you've mentioned, inspiration, having collaborators, having people look at your work and provide feedback really takes you a long way. And then eventually you develop that skill set and that talent. And I appreciate you explaining that. Okay. So I started by picking 3 things that I love and respect about you, Melissa. So just to recap, you are very passionate about your family, about writing, and about music. But for the people out there listening, what is something that we didn't cover that you want them to know about you?
I like to be a support to educators, to friends, to fellow parents. So always know that I'm there for anybody who in the educational field or in the creative writing field, or not that I'm an expert, but it's always nice to have someone to bounce ideas off with. So I'm always there as a support for people. I am an encourager. I love seeing people find their gift and putting it out in the world. It makes me so happy, because I really believe that once we find what we are passionate about, it just makes the collective world a happier place to be. And it's infectious. Like it just spreads. So it was an honor. I had a couple of young kids in their teens and 20s reach out to me and say, I love your writing style. I love how, give me some pointers. And I'd help them back and forth. And I just love it. It makes me so happy. So I'm always here as a support and as a cheerleader and as an encourager.
I love that. I love that. It's so good. And this is the part of the show where I give you your flowers. And the reason why I do that is because I don't believe in telling people how you feel about them when they're not here, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to be told while I'm here. And so I want to tell you, you're making an impact in the world. One of the things that I've seen about you is that you uplift, like you said, people all the time. You use your Twitter feed and your Twitter handle to promote positivity, people,
Mm-hmm.
including myself. And I've seen you do this unselfishly for years. And so I just want to commend you for that. Also, your writing and your professional development that you're being invited to in person, virtually. I saw you at the beginning when you were first starting out. And I see
Right.
that you're always in someone's space now. You are planting seeds. You're helping change the world, one training, one article, one book at a time. And just the fact that you're having young people reach out to you, I think that is such an amazing thing, because I remind myself sometimes, like if your contemporaries aren't singing your praises, there's some college students, there's some young
Mm-hmm.
teachers that
Right.
are going to do what we're doing one day.
Right.
And they're looking and they're learning from us, from you.
Absolutely.
So I
Absolutely.
just want to say thank you for that.
Thank you. And I know you're doing the same. So
Well, let's keep it on you right now, right? Let's keep it
right.
on you now. And that's the type of person she is, y'all. She is the type
Mhm.
of person that she doesn't want to admit that she's an expert, but she is. She wants to put shine on others, but it's about you right now. Okay.
Okay.
Let's put this into the universe. How can people contact you so they can book you,
Mhm.
not just in New Jersey, not just in
Okay.
America, but in
Oh,
Cuba,
international.
all,
Oh,
all over the world? How can people
oh
find
my
you?
goodness. Well, on my website, melissacampesi.com. You can also reach out to me on Instagram or Twitter. And I just love connecting and collaborating. So I look forward to expanding my community. And I'm so grateful to be on your platform and just connecting with you and hopefully inspiring the world around us.
Make sure, y'all, you follow Melissa Campesi on Twitter, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and I'll put a link to her LinkedIn and her website on the show notes. All right, y'all. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Lifelong Learning Defined podcast, and we hope to see you soon.